Hello, my name is Sue and I work with the Youth and Community Development team at Northern Beaches Council. Welcome to the final webinar in the Safe and Sound Wellbeing series. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all of those with a personal experience of suicide or mental ill health, as well as families, friends, carers and support services who help us all to live well. The Safe and Sound webinar series has so far featured 5 free wellbeing webinars aimed at young people, those who support young people, men, women and LGBTIQA+ communities. These webinars have been made possible thanks to grant funding from the New South Wales Ministry of Health, which has also allowed us to bring suicide first aid skills to our community. So tonight's final webinar is helping older people to stay connected. We thank you for tuning in and for acknowledging the importance of older persons' mental health and wellbeing, particularly during this challenging time. This webinar will cover key stresses affecting older people, how we can help better manage those stresses. We shall also be introducing you to some of our fantastic local services and groups. Tonight we've lined up for you Peter and John from the Men's Kitchen, Anna from CCMB, Megan from Relationships Australia and Anne from Anglicare. So I'd also now like to introduce you to Mike Burns, who has helped to moderate all of our webinars to date. So Mike is a psychotherapist and also a trainer with Lifeline Northern Beaches. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Sue. Nice to be here with you for our final webinar. So a few bits of housekeeping before we start. If you haven't watched a webinar using Zoom before, note that your camera and microphone are automatically disabled. There'll be no slides, as this is a conversation style webinar, so you'll only see the person who's currently speaking. The webinar will be recorded and the Northern Beaches Council will make that available on their website over the coming weeks. And you'll be able to find, I think you can already find the previous webinars up on the website.
Some of the webinars are already up online.
Yeah, yep. So you can look at some of those previous topics. So we'll hear from each presenter tonight for around 10 minutes each, and at the end of the webinar we'll have time for some questions. And this is where you come in. Feel free to type your questions in using the Q&A toolbar at the bottom of the screen at any time throughout the webinar. So we realise sometimes when we speak about mental health that people who have a lived experience of this or who are currently feeling vulnerable may find themselves impacted by the material. If this is the case for you, we recommend that you reach out and get support with a friend or a family member or an organisation in a position to hear and support you, such as Lifeline. We encourage you to connect and to get support if you need it. And we hope that you enjoy our webinar tonight.
Right, so first up, we're straight into it with our wonderful panellists. I'd like to welcome John and Peter from the Men's Kitchen. I was wondering, John and Peter, could you tell us a little bit about the Men's Kitchen, what it is that you do?
Thanks, Sue. The Men's Kitchen was formed in 2016 because we saw the need that men our age, my age, were getting to a situation where their partner was fading or had passed away and they were not able to look after their kitchen duties. So we formed this organisation to encourage blokes to come along, be part of what we are and learn some cooking skills and in the process make some new mates and build out the relationships along the way. So to do that, we meet each month in groups of 8 to 10 blokes. Cooking instructor sort of shows them the ropes around the kitchen, and then we have conversations about life and all the mysteries of that while we're cooking the food and subsequently sitting down and eating the meal.
Fantastic. It's such an important thing, isn't it? I know that when you have lost someone, and for a lot of older men, they get to that stage where it's those traditional gender roles of actually not having cooked in the house themselves. So what great skills, and also you provide that social support as well. I wondered if you could perhaps just touch on some of the common issues that men face as they do age.
Yes, well, some of the common issues are basically with men, and if they have varying roles in their careers. Myself, I was a company director and involved very heavily in running an engineering organisation, and I retired through varying circumstances and found that I wanted to give a little bit back to my wife, who's still working and working full time. And I decided to take on board, you know, some of the cooking duties and other duties of the household. And I think a lot of men find this either through their spouse either have health issues or they've passed away. And because they've not done anything in the kitchen before, this gives them an opportunity to learn new skills, gain self-esteem, and find that they give themselves, and it's also getting away from that isolation, because I found myself that you know, I was withdrawing from, you know, being social, and I'm you know, I find that I'm a fairly social sort of individual, and I found this in a way of expressing that and gaining. And I was introduced to it by a friend of mine, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm highly involved in it now.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for summarising that, you know, that story about how you became involved with the Men's Kitchen. I wondered as well whether, is there a way to prepare yourself mentally to retire? It seems that this particular stage in life is often a very challenging time for many men.
Absolutely, Sue. Well, one of my good friends told me before I retired, when I was thinking about it, and I was asking the same question, she said, give yourself 6 to 12 months after you leave work to just unwind, get your brain out of going to work every day, and give you time to think about what do you want to do with your time going forward. And I think the way I would advise people is, when they're coming up to retirement, approach it like you would changing jobs, where you go into it with your eyes open, and you embrace it as a career change, not a retirement. So you're looking from doing something that most of us were driven by a boss, and that we've got a manager that says, you know, jump and you have to say how high, and when you retire, that goes away, and you have to make your own decisions, because you've got all this time, and there's nobody there saying you must do this, you must do that, and a lot of guys look to their wife to actually provide that same supervision, and that's not a good basis of a good relationship. Let me tell you, because you're not actually becoming your own boss. And that's what I think you need to do when you retire. Is you need to become your own boss, make a decision about what you want to do as an individual, not what you have to do. The other analogy I put on there is that you leave home when you're a teenager and you go out to work, and because you have to, because you leave home, you've got to pay the rent. So you have to find a job to pay the rent. So you take on all these life obligations, which over the years gets to be more and more. You have a family, you buy a house, you have obligations for mortgage. You get towards retirement, if you've put a lot of money into your super, as we're being encouraged to do, your kids are gone and left, and they're raising their own family, so you don't have to look after those kids. You might want to look after the grandkids, but you don't have to. It's not like the same obligation that you have when you were a parent. And you don't have to pay the mortgage, because most of us will have paid it off approximately by the time they retire. So a lot of those life obligations have gone away. So if you get to the day you retire and you haven't figured this out, that you have to fulfill your life with other things that are not obligations but are desires, and work towards that in the first year or so of retirement, then you'll be pretty lost. So that's what I encourage people to do, is to consider retirement as a career change, but plan it and think about what you want to do, not what you have to do.
What great advice. Thank you so much for that. And I think that is a fantastic way of explaining that shift, that mental shift that you perhaps need to prepare for. So wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining that. I wondered as well that the Men's Kitchen provides a meeting place for older men, clearly. Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of social connection that's offered by organisations, services and groups just like yours?
Well, I think one of the main things is the loneliness and the disconnection from being out without having a purpose in your life, and that is a very important thing. And when you have a work career, or you've got a career, whether you're self-employed or whether you're an employee, that interaction that you have with staff, with management and so forth is critical. When you're isolated and you've retired, that sort of connection actually disappears and you do become withdrawn, and that can cause anxiety and depression. And I think the important thing is to try and find some interests, some hobbies, an involvement that is going to stimulate to get yourself out of bed each morning and you look forward to the day. And I think that's the big thing. And that's, I think, what Men's Kitchen organisation does give. People look forward to getting together once a month and chatting over the preparation of the food. You learn new skills, you rediscover your self-esteem and confidence. And if you don't have a self-esteem and inner confidence, you lose the ability to do anything. And so that's the importance. And I find that's a real aspect. And health issues such as depression and anxiety, I've seen it for myself through my own family. My mother passed away some time ago, a few years ago, and my father was suffering depression. So I spend a lot of time with him to try and get him, involved in life and reconnecting with people. Because when you do get to a certain age, your world shrinks, as far as social connection is concerned.
Very important words. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would just mention on Council's website, there's a seniors directory, which actually highlights a huge amount of resources, lots of social connections, opportunities. So I would encourage everybody to reach out and have a look at that online. So just finally, I wonder if you could just wrap up for us. How can somebody access the Men's Kitchen? Is it open to anyone as well?
It's open to men of all ages, and you can just go to the website, look up the Men's Kitchen organisation on the internet, and go to our website and gain information through that avenue.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Or it can be referred by friendships, such as it was done by me. I was told by a friend of mine who I've known for many years. I came along and haven't looked back.
Word of mouth is very important, obviously. We've got such a close-knit community. I'm sure most people would know about the Men's Kitchen, but thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experience and your advice as well. Yeah,
I love that idea of retirement as a career change, and the idea that we need purpose, we need meaning in life,
Absolutely.
So retirement isn't just stopping everything you're doing and lying back. You actually need those things to keep life engaging and to keep those connections. And to keep active. So,
For sure.
Yeah, great to hear. Thank you. So our next presenter is Anna from Community Care Northern Beaches. Anna, hello and welcome. Can you give us a bit of an overview of CCNB and what you do?
Thanks, Sue and Mike. CCNB is a not-for-profit organisation based in Frenchs Forest. We were established in 1994 and we work exclusively across the northern Sydney region. We mainly work with older people, people with a disability and people with mental health issues, as well as their families and carers. We provide impartial information, advice and guidance. And the reason why we talk about impartial is that we're quite unique as an organisation. For example, for an older person on a home care package, we don't actually directly deliver the service. We link them with the appropriate organisation to deliver that service. And for a person with a disability, we provide support coordination, so we link them with the appropriate services. We have a strength-based or wellness approach. So for us, it's really important that the person that we're working with is in the driving seat. So we have a conversation with them and find out what's important to them and what they want to achieve. And we find that people that are involved in their planning and developing of their care increases their self-confidence. The way that we work with older people is, as I've talked to before, that coordinating their home care package or linking them with Commonwealth Home Support Services. We coordinate the NDIS support coordination or their packages. We link and ensure that people with mental health issues have access to the right services. And we also work with light case management with GPs and provide a GP social work program.
Thanks, Anna. It's quite a comprehensive list of services. And I really like how you say it's important for the people you're working with to have a voice in how that support is delivered. They have a say in how that's run. And I think that's really important, that people are able to have that voice and have that empowerment, like you said. And we talk a lot too in this webinar about connection and how important it is. Anna, what programs do you offer the community at CCMB to remain connected?
So we have a number of ways to ensure that the people in our community are connected. In response to COVID-19, we started the Staying Well, Staying Connected program, which is based on the principles of kindness, compassion and care, and that provided information, advice and guidance. We were so lucky to be able to leverage the generosity of the community, and we were able to onboard over 100 volunteers to ensure that people in our community remained connected during that time. So many people think that older people can't volunteer or don't volunteer. Our oldest volunteer is 93, and she volunteered for the Legacy Art program. So she worked with older people to record their story through art. So there's a number of different ways that older people and people can volunteer. Through the COVID-19, we ensure that volunteers keep the people in our community connected through phone catch-ups, through delivering essential care packs, and also supporting people to access technology, so helping them to create that Facebook page and connect with family, or that enable them to set up Zoom so they can Zoom their mates or their friends. Also, so that they could use telehealth, which was really important. Often people think that the only person that benefits from volunteering is the person connected with the volunteer. Actually, the volunteer, it's a two-way street. They benefit as well, because it not only gives them a sense of purpose, it gives them a sense of belonging, and it also makes them happy and healthier. And I think as an organisation, we believe it's really important to make sure that the volunteers are developed. So we've had an upskill program that's run for 8 weeks for our volunteers, and we've educated them on a number of different topics, ranging from hoarding to dementia. Other ways that we ensure that our community is connected, we've developed a Zoom knitting group or a Zoom knitting group. So each week at 4:30, there's a group of ladies and men that come together and chat and knit, and they're creating squares to develop a Wraps for Love blanket. We've also, when we're not in lockdown and now our volunteers are back face to face with people in the community, we have compassionate cafes. So there's one in Narrabeen and also in Mona Vale once a month, where people that are socially isolated and lonely can come together with other like-minded people. And we have Chattuccino, which is a dementia-specific group that socially connects people with dementia and their carers. So there's a number of different ways that we keep our community connected. For example, community conversations, so educating the community and information sharing.
What a wonderful array of offerings. Thank you, Anna. It's a really widespread. And I love how during the pandemic you've been able to utilise Zoom and those online technologies to keep people engaged and connected, which is so critical to mental health, as we really well know. And it sounds like you're back in business now and you're doing some face-to-face meetings now.
Yes, and the volunteers couldn't wait. It was a question that kept on coming. Can we go back face-to-face? And yes, so they were very excited to be able to connect face-to-face with that person and take them to a cafe or go to the library, get them out for a walk, do some gardening together. There's lots of different opportunities.
That's fabulous. And as you said, volunteering obviously is a great way to stay connected. It keeps you connected with the community, it gives you an opportunity to give back, and it also ensures that you have that regular contact, you know, which we know is really critical for well-being. So lovely that you've got so many opportunities for people to volunteer, but you're also offering programs that people can just come along and be a part of and find ways of connecting on their level. So that's really nice to hear. So Anna, if someone wants to access your service, what is the best way to do that?
So they can either call us on 1-800-002-262, or they can log on to our website, or the other way is that they can have a conversation with their GP. GPs really want to reduce loneliness and social isolation, and they can request a referral for social prescription to CCMB. So that's another way of connecting with us.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Anna, for your time tonight. I really appreciate you sharing what CCNB offers and how they can be accessed. So just a reminder to anybody watching tonight that if you want to submit a question to any of our presenters or just a question in general, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, which will allow you to type a question in, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Mike. Well, now we come to our next speaker, and it's Megan from Relationships Australia. Megan, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the program, which is Elder Support and Mediation Service, which is offered by Relationships Australia.
I'd love to. Hi, Sue. Hi, Mike. And hello, everyone who's listening. The program name is called Let's Talk. It's an elder mediation and support service. And it's a service that's been designed and to help families and older adults have conversations that might be difficult around decision making or conflict regarding aging or aging related issues. So we're there, and we have a mediation service, and we also work very closely with counsellors to provide support, and sometimes just linking people to other informational services that might be able to support the family at a given point in time or the older person.
Thank you, Megan. And I guess I just wanted to question, I know that Lifeline Northern Beaches have told us that many people that access their service for counselling are actually seeking help with managing relationships with their family members. Could you perhaps touch on some of the key stresses that older people may experience when it comes to relationships within a family setting?
I think we can all relate to relationships that when they're going well, they're great. But they often have challenges, and there's often stress points, and there's often real challenges in relationships. Some of the stories that we hear, or some of the concerns that people who call us talk about around some conflict that is continuing in their family. It might be with a spouse or a partner, and it might be with adult children. There might be transitions in their life, like we've heard about retirement or losing a spouse or a partner, and the concerns that they have. And then sometimes there's this thing that happens that older children tend to want to take over and become the decision makers. And sometimes for some older adults, it's like, hang a tick, like this is my life and my decisions. And unfortunately, sometimes those older adult children or other people in the older person's lives can take advantage of the older person, financially, emotionally. So there's a whole lot of things that we need to be really careful that older people have a voice, can express their wishes, and know that they've got some rights and entitlements as well. I think we can relate to families as well, like when you've got sibling rivalry when they're younger, it might dissipate a bit as we all get a little bit older, but when it comes to then maybe making decisions with your older adult family members around their care or their decisions, the sibling rivalry and jealousies can really come to the fore. And sometimes you've got an older adult trying to make the best of maybe losing a spouse, making some decisions about their life, and having different children squabbling around decisions that they need to make. And as I said, sometimes there's some serious concerns about abuse or neglect of the older adult as well.
I can see how that could be very distressing perhaps for an older person in terms of that anxiety when they're wanting to maintain that family relationship, but clearly this is getting in the way. I was wondering if you could perhaps give our audience some tips on how to better manage those stresses, and perhaps also how your service could support them at that time.
So what I think is one of the really important things to do is to make sure that that we're listening and that we're noticing, so that we're aware of, if you're an older adult yourself, that you're just aware for yourself if there's things that are happening that you're not comfortable with. You're not alone. It's sometimes a really difficult thing to talk about if you're concerned about family members. If there's struggles, like you don't have the ideal looking family, and it's not too late to work on relationships. So sometimes it's actually just having time to talk and raise concerns, and you can do it directly or with the support of people for counsellors. So Relationships Australia at DY has counselling services there. But sometimes you need some support, particularly when there's conflict, to help have to run those conversations for you, and that's where our mediation service can come in. We need to be aware of ageism as well, that sometimes people think that, and like I've working in this space now for the last couple of years, the program's only been going for a couple of years. I've been really shocked by my own attitudes to things in terms of the ceilings we put on people or the entitlement that people have about older people's assets. So that's one of the big ones that we notice, is that, that sometimes care and financial situations get mixed up together, and that sometimes when people are wanting to make decisions like that, maybe living with older family members, joining households, they're great solutions in many cases. But I guess one of the things we say is make sure that you talk, that you're aware and get financial and legal information beforehand, and that it's okay to talk about what you want, and it's okay to be quite formal with setting up arrangements, because things go well when they go well, but when they fall apart, you really want to make sure that you've been protected, and particularly around finances, but also the relationships. So a lot of, I didn't mention it before, but a lot of, you've been talking about isolation. Sometimes an older person is isolated from some family members, and particularly grandchildren, and that's really painful. So what we try to do is I guess in a way, broker peace, create a safe space for people to have conversations, but making sure that rights and safety are addressed and prioritised.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Megan. I can see that a lot of people would get a lot out of being able to access your service when things do not work out as they had really envisaged that they should. We know that there's the Family Relationship Centre in DY. Is that how they would access your service, or is there another way of accessing the Let's Talk program?
Well, our service can be offered from DY for sure. We're based just centrally at Macquarie Park. It's a service that we try and go to where people need to be. So in some of our services, we ask people to come to our office so we can provide it by phone or online, but we also can go to where a more convenient place might be for people. And we're able to offer it at the moment around the Sydney metropolitan area. We've also got some people out in Bathurst doing the work for us, and we've got a sister organisation down in Wagga. So we're trying to be able to provide support for regional families as well, and just noticing, like, often families and people who need to talk are all over the place. So we do our best. So the best way to contact us is either through our website or our phone number, which I'm pretty sure the details will be given at the end.
That's great. Thank you so much, Megan. It sounds like you're really flexible with the service, so that's fantastic. And yes, definitely what we will be doing is we will be emailing all participants, and all of the contact details for all of the services and programs that have been discussed tonight will go in that package. So thank you again, Megan.
Really interesting to hear about some of those challenges, Sue, and like all relationships, the importance of communication and being clear on what the needs are and how you can best meet those needs.
Absolutely, and treating each other with respect. Clearly.
With respect being really important. Yeah. So our final presenter is Anne from Anglicare. So hello, Anne, and welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. So can you tell us a bit about Anglicare, and in particular the emotional wellbeing in older persons program that you run?
Yes, I will. This is a new program that is running across the Sydney North Health region, and it's funded by the Commonwealth Government to provide mental health services to people who live in residential aged care. So mostly people over the age of 65 who've got a diagnosis of a mental illness who are at risk of developing such a diagnosis. And we've only been running for 8 months now. That's us.
Wow, okay. And so what have you noticed in those 8 months? How's the program been received?
There's a big need out there. It might interest you to know that about 50% of those who live in registered aged care facilities have a diagnosis of depression, a mental illness. So we've been trying to build the service up slowly and getting ourselves known. And we are slowly getting to know all the individual needs of all the individual nursing homes and taking quite a few referrals on board now as well.
Yeah. And have you noticed any particular themes with those clients or any of those underlying concerns that might be there in people who present for that service?
Well, when a person enters an aged care home, it's usually because they're not able to cope very well at home. And so mostly all the clients that we have will have some level of what we call cognitive impairment, memory loss, memory problems. And sometimes that can be due to depression, but sometimes that can be due to a syndrome that we call dementia. And we've noticed that most people as well have varying degrees of physical health issues. That can be mobility problems, difficulties with breathing, cardiac problems. So mental health issues in the older person rarely ever come alone. They usually exist side by side with another problem that the person's experiencing.
Yeah, yeah. And, 50% of your clients experiencing depression or people in, those homes experiencing depression is an incredibly high number. So how might friends or family members recognise when someone who's elderly in their family might have mental health challenges?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's quite difficult for the health professional sometimes to recognise it because of all the complications that I've just talked about. But, some of the most common ways that you might recognise that your family member's having a difficult time is maybe they become withdrawn, socially withdrawn into themselves. They might lose interest in activities that they used to enjoy, like going to golf. They might suddenly lose interest in that. They could have disturbed sleep. They might be preoccupied with worry, feel panicky, have difficulty following a conversation, have mood changes. Now, we say with mood changes that mood changes can be quite normal. We're not all of us are not happy all the time. When it gets into the realm of something like a depression, it's usually something that the person feels low in mood every single day for at least 2 weeks. And that's how you know that a person may be depressed as opposed to just feeling grumpy one day. Of course, there are other things, a general level of indecisiveness. But basically, if any of the attendees were to notice any change in a behavior of their loved one or a change in the conversation and someone talking in a different way to what they normally do, that might be a bit of a flag that perhaps there's a mental health issue developing there.
And so if a friend or family member doesn't notice that there is something developing or something that's shifting or changing, how can they best support that family member?
Yeah, well, it can be very difficult, especially if the person is resisting help and maybe does not recognise what the loved one is recognising in them. And I always think it's really important to talk to people in a certain way. Encourage your loved one to talk about what's going on for them. Start your conversation with the word I, like I notice X is happening. I noticed that you didn't have a good night's sleep last night. you can notice the difference between saying that and starting your sentence with the word you. Like if someone said to me, you didn't sleep last night, that would feel totally different to if they said to me, oh, I noticed you had a bad night's sleep. But sometimes it's about the language we use with people. Also trying to encourage someone to talk about their problem and perhaps go and visit their GP to get some help. Small actions are much better. Encouraging people to make small steps, make small changes is really important.
Yeah, great. And I really like that, that it is important that we use language in that responsible way by taking ownership of our experience. I'm noticing this about you. It can sound very accusatory, can't it, if I say you did this or you did that. And so it's important that we're able to frame it in a way that's supportive and curious as well. You know, what's this like for you? You know, you're inviting a connection. And what we're talking about here is disconnection, and often that depression is a societal thing. When someone withdraws from society, when they move into that isolation, that's often where those symptoms then arise. So being able to invite someone back into connection again, using language that's supportive and caring and curious about their experience, I think is really important. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Anne. Appreciate that. And so if someone was going to access your service, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, we have a dedicated phone line. I thought that Jessica is going to email all the attendees after the program with the number. There is a referral process if we see people living in nursing homes. So if you've got a loved one who lives in a nursing home, it'd be really good to speak to the nurse in charge, the care manager, the director of nursing. They all know how to access our program.
Lovely, thank you, Anna. And as you say, those details will be sent out as well. Great to know that that service is there to support people, especially when they're feeling that isolation and that disconnection. Really important. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, we've finished with all our 4 panellists. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom and expanding a little bit more about your services in your group. We'd now like to go to some of the questions that have come through. So the first question will be for Anna. The first question we have is, if someone is thinking of volunteering, what can they do to assist in keeping people connected? That might be different to the traditional volunteering roles, such as Meals on Wheels.
So there's so many different ways that someone can volunteer. As I said, they can, if they don't actually want to physically go and meet face to face with someone, they can do a phone catch up. They can participate in our community or compassionate cafe. They can do some gardening or take someone to a cafe or the library. Or they can, if someone talked the other day, wouldn't it be great if there were 2 older people that weren't connected, and a volunteer could maybe make that connection and facilitate that. So I think the opportunities are endless. It's dependent on what the person wants to do and what they like, and we'll try and make it happen.
I think that's the wonderful thing that I like about your program at CCMB. It's so flexible. You have got so many options and different ways that people can engage in your service and be connected with somebody within the community. So thank you for all that you do, and thanks for explaining that, Anna.
Thank you.
Mike, I think you have a question now for Peter.
Yes, hi Peter. So how would you suggest that older people stay connected when dealing with social isolation and distancing during a time such as COVID?
Well, oddly enough, we have I explained earlier, we have cooking sessions where older blokes come into a community centre to cook and to unite with other blokes. We have a program going at the moment where, with our limited means we have available, we have about 8 or 10 guys get on their Zoom once a week, and they learn how to cook remotely. So it has most of the benefits of being face to face, but not quite the same as being in the same room. But it's quite a delight actually to to sit in your kitchen with your iPad or whatever in the corner, and all the other blokes are appearing on the screen, so you have a chat with them, and the cooking instructor sort of takes each one individually and explains what they might need to do for them. They all cook the same dish, but so the cooking instructor mentors, and all the guys dive in, and then they have a show and tell at the end as to how successful or otherwise the meal was. In fact, a funny incident happened just a while back on one of these virtual cooking sessions. One of the blokes was told to buy a particular dish to put in the oven and also be able to cook on top. So he bought a Pyrex dish and he stuck it on top of his stove and filled it with ingredients, and the thing exploded.
Yeah.
So that was a little interesting, little excitement on the day. So we've made sure everybody else is very aware that if you're going to put a dish on the top of the hot plate, you don't use Pyrex.
Yeah, well, we certainly learn from experience, don't we? I'm sure everybody learned something from that. But I love the idea of being able to, do those lessons remotely. I want to sign in myself, Sue, and,
I know.
and get some cooking tips.
Me
it sounds
too, but
like a
maybe I
fabulous way to stay connected, and a very creative way for people not only to learn new skills, but to stay in contact and communication, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Next, we have a question which I might ask of Anne. Anne, can you tell us how retirement and loss of a lifelong partner can affect mental health and well-being?
Yes, certainly. So these are quite significant losses for people as they get older. And people can experience feelings of grief. Now, grief is very different to depression. The general thinking is that grief is a temporary thing; it goes away after a while, and it can result in the person feeling some quite difficult and unexpected emotions in themselves, like anger, guilt, sadness, that might feel unusual or different. They're quite normal when you experience the loss of everything, whether it's a bereavement, whether it's the loss of a partner, like when you, as Peter and John mentioned earlier, leave your job and face retirement. You can also feel, I think Peter and John both mentioned, also feeling losing your interest and feeling empty. But when grief becomes depression, I think the standard is that if grief lasts, I think the latest thinking is that if grief is protracted beyond 2 months and is quite severe, then it possibly could be a depression. So it would be very important to go and talk to your GP if anyone is experiencing this. The GP will have a good idea whether it's a grief or whether it could be something more significant like depression. Because grief is usually tied to a particular event. Depression can occur out of nowhere, not tied to any particular event. That's what can happen with a depression. So they're some of the experiences that people can have when they retire or lose a partner.
Thank you, Anne. I mean, grief is such a complex emotion, isn't it? And you can see how some triggers can happen throughout different life stages that we do experience. So I really do appreciate those words. Thank you.
Yeah. So a question for you, Megan. How can family members assist in making decisions around aged care for a parent with dementia when they don't want to seek support and the family is concerned that they should not be living alone?
We do get a fair few families come this way, and I think one of the things that, and it can come in all different ways. It could be, there could still be a partner living as well. So there could be decisions in place. So the older person may already have said what they'd want to do if they couldn't make decisions themselves. So I guess one of the tips before is really, if you can plan ahead and choose people and let them know what you would wish if you could no longer make those decisions for yourself, that's important. And also to understand that dementia is a big concept. It's just one word, and it has a lot of different things. It doesn't mean that people can't make all decisions. It might be some or maybe not. I'm not quite sure where that person is on that journey, but I would highly recommend getting support from someone who's specialised in that area. And in some of the mediations we've done, we've actually worked with Dementia Australia, and they've come and supported the family in terms of letting them know what might be expected in the near while and in the longer while, what kind of options could be considered now and in the future, and really giving the family members information so that when they're making the decision, they're actually making it on good information and with support. And unfortunately, it's absolutely right that people will have different views and opinions about what might be the best decision, but sometimes a decision needs to be made. So it's trying to help people come together, keeping utmost and foremost what the rights and wishes of the person who's they're making the decision for, if that person can't contribute to their own decision making. So not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, and I think sometimes we leave the conversations too late. We don't actually sit down and talk with everyone else about what we're thinking and feeling. And as we've mentioned before, there's transitions and there's loss and grief. So there could be a whole lot of stuff impacting how you're making that decision as well. So maybe getting some individual support about your relationship with the person who has dementia and how you're feeling about the disease and how that person is going. I'm not sure, does that answer the question? I'm happy to leave it at that, but happy to also clarify.
It sounds good to me, Megan. I mean, really the point you're making is, and Anne spoke about grief before and what a significant thing it is. And obviously someone with dementia, you're grieving that person, you know, moving away from you. You're losing access to that person that you had before. And I think it's a very complex thing to manage, and obviously will bring up a lot for people. But I'm really hearing you say there's a lot of support around it, and there's a lot of information to help people make decisions with that, you know. And there's a saying that information reduces anxiety, and I think it can be a very anxious time for people when they're trying to manage, you know, members of the family who might be experiencing that. So I think it's really relevant and really important.
Great, thank you so much, Megan. We have a question for Anne. We're getting some great questions coming in, so thank you everybody that's watching us tonight. So, Anne, the question is, how does someone provide support to older parents or family members when they're living far away, perhaps interstate?
Yes, so often older people will say to the members of our team that they miss their family since moving into aged care, moving into a nursing home. Even when they live nearer, they don't see them as often. But if you live further away in another state, it's even more difficult. We encourage people to telephone their relatives if that's possible. Nowadays, you can use your tablet. You'd be surprised. We've been using telehealth, and we're quite surprised at the adeptness that older people of using the iPad. So never assume that just because a person is older that they won't be able to use an iPad, because we've found that is not the case. So when you're physically distant, use these methods of communication like the telephone, the internet, the email, the WhatsApp, all those things, Facebook. Try them out because they might work. That would be my advice.
Great advice. And I know from my own perspective, my mum was on Facebook before I'd even heard of it. So, and I know also Anna mentioned, you know, from CCMB's perspective, they do a great deal of work in terms of helping for older people that are not familiar with technology to get them online. So that's a great way of CCMB connecting. So perhaps if you have an older person or older family member that's living away, there might be another service like CCMB that is in that location that perhaps you could connect with and get help with. A lot of libraries have services where they connect you with a younger person that can show you how to use technology. So there's lots of options. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Anne.
It's an opportunity to learn. You know, we know that the brain really operates at its peak when we're using it regularly. You know, so by learning something new, it's a great way to keep that brain active and engaged. So really, win-win.
Absolutely.
Keeps you connected and gets you learning. So a question for you, Anna. What activities, and I'm not sure about the second part of the question, you might have to interpret it, but I'll ask both parts. What activities can I do with an older person that I connect with? So what activities can I do with an older person that I connect with? And what if the person I connect with doesn't work out?
Sure, thanks. So it's really about having that conversation, and we encourage our volunteers to have that conversation with the person and find out what their interests are, what their hobbies are, what they like to do. Is there something that they used to really enjoy doing, but now that they don't have the ability because they might have lost their license or families moved away? So yes, just finding out what they want. It's very much being guided by the person themselves, and as I said before, making sure that they're in the driving seat and listening to what they want. So there's lots of different activities there, and I won't list them, but it's very much listening to the person. And the second part of the question, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, so I believe it's probably being asked in a volunteer capacity. So what if somebody volunteers to work with an older person and that relationship isn't quite working out? That's my sense of the question.
Absolutely, and sometimes that's a barrier to people asking or wanting to be supported by a volunteer. What if it doesn't work out? Well, that's fine. We try our best to match people with similar interests and hobbies, but it's absolutely okay to say, look, I don't think it's working, and then we can try and match you with someone else. So I think it's really important to speak up and say that it's not working, and then we'll try and do something different and connect with another person, because not everyone gets on, and yeah, that's fine. There's always an opt-out.
Indeed, and it's important to have that voice. And I think it's a good rule of thumb for any kind of support that somebody accesses. You know, if it's not working for you, look around, find a support service that does work, find a connection or an activity or something that does work for you. You know, there's no one size fits all, and certainly we don't all connect in the same way, but it's important that you find some people that you can connect with, you know, because that's the critical message. So thank you, Anna.
Absolutely. So a question's come in for Mike. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about the courses that Lifeline offers, and how can someone enrol in some of those training courses that you run?
Thank you, Sue. So yeah, Lifeline offers, Lifeline Northern Beaches offers the accidental counsellor course, which is one of their primary offerings. It's a 4-hour course, which is designed to encourage people in the community or within organisations to recognise if somebody might be experiencing distress or crisis, to learn how to respond to them using active listening to understand the person's experience, learning to know more, bringing that curiosity we've spoken about tonight, to find out more about what's happening for that person, and to be able to ask them directly about if they're having thoughts of suicide as well, which is a really important element of mental health, that often people, if they're really experiencing a lot of pain or they're really struggling, often suicide can seem like a way out of that pain. Often they don't want to die, but they want the pain to stop. So being able to understand that, being able to recognise what suicide is and how to support someone who may be having those thoughts. People who do the training often report feeling more confident that they can have those conversations, they can ask that question. And I think it makes for a safer society, that people then have the confidence to be able to engage with someone in distress and have a conversation where they can hear more about their experience. And of course, the final part, being able to refer that person on to professional supports if that's warranted as well. So that's one of the offerings with Accidental Counsellor. There's some domestic and family violence training. And one of the other trainings that we offer is for volunteers. So if somebody wanted to work on the phones as a crisis support volunteer, which is a national service, Lifeline Northern Beaches has, I think, about 10 phone booths in there. They're not all fully operational at the moment due to social distancing, but there's been a surge in interest in volunteering for Lifeline. It's a 10-week training course. I'm one of the trainers for that. It's a real delight to train people who are eager to give back to the community, who want to volunteer, who want to give their time. And it's open to anybody who's interested in the training. It really has some great grounding in the fundamentals of really supporting someone, listening to understand, really engaging with someone, and using a lot of different skills to help open up a conversation and help someone explore their experience more, which is the essence of being able to support somebody well. So have a look on the Lifeline Northern Beaches website. There's also public workshops coming up with Accidental Counsellor you can sign up for. So jump on that, find a date that works for you, and take a look at that. I think it's a really useful training for people to do.
Great, thank you, Mike. Having done the Accidental Counsellor training online with Mike, I can certainly vouch for how good it is, how comprehensive and how equipped you feel at the end of it. And yeah, totally give a good push for that one, Mike.
Thanks, Sue, appreciate that.
Welcome.
So, Sue, let's finish with a question for you. So,
okay.
If somebody does want to be more involved in this space, obviously we've heard from some specific organisations throughout the webinar and how people can volunteer for them. And I know the council is also really promoting a more sort of bigger picture, looking at the whole community and how people can support. What might they do to be involved in that?
Sure. Well, Mike, I mean, Council and its key partners, including Lifeline Northern Beaches and CCMB, the police, local health district, the Primary Health Network and Northern Beaches Hospital, and representatives of lived experience, have actually been working behind the scenes pretty hard for the last 2 years on a variety of actions and strategies to reduce suicide on the Northern Beaches. One of the key things that has come out of that is that we secured this funding from the New South Wales Ministry of Health, and that has actually allowed us to run suicide first aid skills training. We're calling it the Gatekeeper Training Project over the next 2.5 years. So that will actually equip our community to actually have those skills, to be able to reach out, have that difficult conversation and to keep people safe. So we're really excited about that. All that information is on our website if you haven't already signed up for that training. Part of that training, part of that project is not just the training, but it's allowed us to do the Safe and Sound webinar that you're dialing into tonight. And we'll be doing a whole lot of other community forums, podcasts, ways to really connect with men, young people, those that support young people, older people, and emergency services. That's a really exciting part to come. The other really exciting thing is this time next week, so that's Wednesday, the 8th of July, we're partnering with Wesley Life Force to run the first meeting to discuss forming a local suicide prevention network. This is going to be open to all the community members and also any local services or community groups that really want to be involved. And that night we'll sort of talk about what's involved in terms of establishing a network. You'll also hear from retired Superintendent Dave Darcy, which is pretty exciting. He's coming back to us because he's our champion. Anyway, so please, I encourage you to dial up. We'll be getting an email out on that soon. And of course, all the amazing volunteering opportunities we've got. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Welcome.
Good. So, thank you everyone for your contributions tonight. Thank you everyone who submitted a question. I think we got through a pretty good range of questions tonight, so we don't always get through as many, so thanks to everyone who did submit. If you didn't get your question answered, I hope that the information that gets sent out at the end of tonight will answer any questions that you do have.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Mike. Right, well, so we've come to the end of our last webinar in the Safe and Sound Wellbeing series. So we really hope this webinar has provided you with a greater understanding of some of the key stressors affecting older persons' mental health and wellbeing. We aim to provide you with some ideas on supporting older people, as well as building a connection with some of our local services and supports. So connection really clearly does matter, and it's been the common theme throughout all of our webinars. Being connected to others is important for our mental health and can be a protective factor for our wellbeing. So if you haven't already done so, as I said, please sign up on Council's website for our suicide prevention training, which is part of the Gatekeeper Training Project. We really need our community to consider suicide first aid skills as important as learning CPR. If you want to join in next week for the local Suicide Prevention Network, we'll be sending you an email with those details, or you can go online and find a link for it. Just Google Local Suicide Prevention Network, Northern Beaches, and it's all up there already. And please, we encourage you to make a difference, either through volunteering or signing up to the network. So to Peter, John, Anna, Megan, Anne, and of course Mike, we're so grateful for your time and insights tonight. A huge shout out to my colleagues Liz and Jess, who've worked busily behind the scenes, and the team at Lifeline Northern Beaches who helped us develop the webinars. Thank you also to the staff from Glen Street, Damien and Daniel, who provided us with a venue and their technical expertise. And so to all of you logged on to join us tonight, thank you for your interest and questions. Stay safe and take care. Good night.
Good night.